Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Here's Mubin Nas. I'm from MK Preparations, and today we're going to discuss about community ecology. So this topic is very much important, and the candidates can prepare this topic for the preparation of different competitive exams like Punjab Public Service Commission, PPSC Zoology, Sindh Public Service Commission, SPSC, Federal Public Service Commission, FPSC, Balochistan Public Service Commission, BPSC, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Public Service Commission, KPPSC. So, dear candidates, the material coded in these slides have been taken from different source books, which includes FSC Biology, Federal Biology, Miller and Harley, Hickman Zoology, Campbell Biology, and Riazul Haq Rame book. Okay, so let's start our topic. So the contents that we'll discuss here includes the community ecology general introduction, interspecific interactions, competition, predation, herbivory, parasitism, mutualism, commensalism, trophic structure including the food chain and food web, species with large impact including the dominant and keystone species, then guilds, then ecological succession, ecotones, and ecological niche. And at the end, we'll discuss about some important questions for your expected exams, okay? So let's start our topic. First of all, we'll discuss about the community ecology, that what is a community ecology? Okay, so a group of populations of different species living in close enough proximity to interact is called a biological community. Means a community is a collection of the populations of different species living and interacting in the same environment or area. Okay, so the study of the organization and the functioning of the communities, which are assemblages of interacting populations of the species living within a particular area or habitat. So it is the study of all the organization, all the structures and the functioning of the communities that are actually the assemblages of the populations, okay? Populations of different species living within a particular area or within a particular habitat. Okay. Now we'll discuss about some interspecific interactions. So the interactions with the individuals of the other species in the community means when the individuals of one species are going to interact with the individuals of the other species in one community. So such interactions are known as interspecific interactions, which includes the competition, predation, herbivory, parasitism, mutualism, commensalism. Okay, so let's discuss these interspecific interactions one by one. So the first one is competition. Okay. Now the competition is a minus interaction. Minus interaction in it means that both of the participants in this case can have harm. Okay, so it's a minus interaction, or you can say negative interaction that occurs when individuals of the different species compete for a resource that limits the survival and reproduction of each species. And these resources might include the shelter, the food, or the living space. Means the members of the two species, they might fight with each other for the mating purposes, okay, for getting a chance for the reproduction, or for the food, or for the living area or the habitat, okay. So no species benefits from the interaction. So in a competition, both of the participants will surely have some kind of disadvantages or harms, okay? So in competitive interactions, species evolve either to avoid each other, to tolerate the presence of the other, to aggressively exclude the other, okay? So competitive interactions result in these results. They might start avoiding each other. They might need to tolerate the presence of each other, or they might aggressively exclude, means they are going to kill each other, okay? So here is an example of the competition. The weeds growing in a garden compete with the garden plants for soil nutrients and water. Okay. So we know that the plants are for sure getting enough nutrients from the soil. So the weeds also need these nutrients and the water. So that's why they will compete with the garden plants. And in this case, there is a possibility that the garden plants might have lesser chances of obtaining these soil nutrients and the water. So, lynx and foxes in the northern forests of Alaska and Canada compete for the prey, such as snowshoe hares. Okay, so lynx and foxes, both of these are sharing the same snowshoe hare organism as a prey. So that's why they will fought with each other to get a chance to have this prey. Okay, so ecological niches and the natural selection. So two species cannot coexist permanently in a community if their niches are identical. Niche is actually there are two definitions of the niche. The first one is the area or the location where an organism lives. Or the second definition is that the role that a species is going to perform in the community is known as the niche. Okay, so ecologically similar species can coexist in a community if one or more significant differences in their niches arise through time. So, evolution by the natural selection can result in one of the species using a different set of the resources or similar resources at different times of the day or the year. So, this is known as the resource partitioning, that the differentiation of the niches that enables a similar species to coexist in our communities. Okay, so different niches due to which similar species are going to adapt in a specific area of the community. So, this is known as the resource partitioning. Now, there are different types of the competitions: the exploitation competition and the interference competition. So, first of all, what is exploitation competition? So, when species compete by capturing the resources faster than their competitors. So, this is known as the exploitation competition. They're going to compete by capturing resources faster than their competitors. Okay. So this is known as exploitation. Example includes the plant species. They are able to extract the water and the nutrients from the soil faster than the surrounding species. So that's why these are going to exploit the other species living in the same area. So by the process of the exploitation competition. Now the second one is interference competition. So when the two species physically interfere with one another is called the interference competition by aggressively attempting to exclude one another from the particular habitats. So there is a huge difference between these two, the exploitation and the interference competition. In exploitation, the two members from the two different species are not going to be in any physical interference or in any kind of fighting. So definitely, if they are going to dominate one area, so definitely the other species, if one species is going to dominate an area, so the other species will surely be exploited out. But in case of interference competition, and there is a kind of physical interference in the form of the fighting between these two individuals. So they will have some kind of aggression which will exploit the one or which will exclude the one species from the environment. Okay, so the effects of the competition. Over the evolutionary time, the effects can vary. In some environments, the effects may be highly asymmetrical and at the extreme called the amencilism. The survival or the growth of one species may be inhibited and the others not affected. So, what is amencilism actually? That as a result of the competition, the one species is going to be survive and the other species is not going to be affected at all. Okay. So the second effect of competition is that the weaker competitor will either go extinct locally or it will diverge from the other species in its use of resources, or the weaker competitor evolve an increased competitive ability. Okay. So the all the three outcomes have been observed in natural selection. Okay, so all these three outcomes have been observed in nature and experimental populations studied by the ecologists. Now, the character displacement. So, species diverge from one another through the competition, with the result that they will fill different niches within the community. So, this is known as the character displacement. Means the species are going to diverge from each other by the process of the competition. When they're going to fight with each other, when they're going to compete with each other, they will surely diverge from each other and they will occupy the different niches within the same community. Okay, so this is known as the character displacement. Like here is an example of the bill size and shape in the Darwin's finches in the Galapagos Island. That on the Galapagos Island, Darwin observed that there are almost 13 types of finches on that island, and these finches differ from each other due to difference in the bill size and the shape. And the bill size and the shape is different in these Galapagos finches because of the difference in the habitat, because of the difference in the nutrition habitats. Okay, so this process called the character displacement results as natural selection favors those individuals in each species that compete least with individuals of the other species. Okay, so like for the Galapagos finches, when there was only one species, when it moved from one location to another location, so in that location it just come out with different type of the feeding habitat. That's why a change in the bill size and the shape took place and it get evolved into a new species. Okay, now the predation. Okay, so a predation is a positive negative interaction in which one organism, that is predator, it's going to have benefit and the other organism, that is prey, is going to have the disadvantage. So it's an interaction between the species in which one species, the predator, it will kill or eat the other species, that is prey. Okay, so through the term predation generally elicits such images as a lion attacking and eating an antelope. So lion is actually a predator and antelope is actually a prey. A rotifer. Rotifer is a tiny aquatic animal that is smaller than many unicellular protists. So that kills a protist. By eating, it can also be considered a predator. So a rotifer is a predator and the protist is actually a prey. Most predators have acute senses that enable them to find and identify the potential prey, and these senses are of different types. We'll discuss about these senses later. So rattlesnakes and the other pit vipers, for example, find their prey with a pair of the heat sensing organs located between their eyes and the nostrils. So this rattlesnake and the pit viper have the heat sensing organs between their eyes and the nostrils for detecting their prey. Owls have characteristically large eyes. So these large eyes are the senses for the owls to detecting their prey. Many predators also have adaptations such as the claws, fangs, or the poison. Okay, so their claws on the fingers, their fangs, or the poison. These are all the senses that they actually use to have their prey. Now, the cannibalism. Okay. So, in which individuals of the same species prey on one another also has arisen many times and is common in some animal species. Okay. So, individuals of the same species are going to prey on each other. This is known as cannibalism. Like the salamanders and the toads, they have the tadpoles that occur in two forms, one of which has a specialized head that allows it to cannibalize the other tadpoles of the same species. So salamanders and tadpoles are actually of two types, in which the one having the large or specialized head will eat up the other, that is small tadpole. Okay. Animals also display a variety of the morphological and physiological defensive adaptations. So the first one is the aposematic coloration or the warning coloration. So animals with the effective chemical defenses exhibit the bright aposematic coloration or the warning coloration, such as that of the poison dart frog. Okay, so they are using this poison dart frog, as you can see here. This poison dart frog is actually using an aposematic or the warning coloration. This strong coloration will detect the predator that this frog is actually a poisonous frog. So that's why the predator will avoid this frog. Such coloration seems to be adaptive because predators often avoid the brightly colored prey. Now, the second is the cryptic coloration or the camouflage. Camouflage means to hide itself. So it makes the prey difficult to see because the prey is going to get resemblance with some other location or with some other place. Okay. So some prey species are protected by their resemblance to the other species. For example, in Batesian mimicry, a palatable or harmless species mimics an unpalatable or harmful species to which it is not closely related. Okay, so you can see here in Batesian mimicry, this one is a harmless species going to mimic a harmful one. So this one is the venomous green snake, parrot snake, and now a non-venomous hawk moth larva. This larva is actually showing resemblance to this venomous green snake so that it can deceive a predator. So the larva of the hawkmoth ornatus puffs up its head and thorax when disturbed and looking like the head of a small venomous snake. In Mullerian mimicry, two or more unpalatable species, such as the cuckoo bee and the yellow jacket, they resemble each other. Okay, so you can see here in Mullerian mimicry, two unpalatable species are going to mimic each other. Okay. Now the herbivory. Okay, so ecologists use the term herbivory to refer an exploitative means a plus minus interaction in which an organism and herbivore it's going to get the benefit. It will eat the parts of the plant or the algae. So the algae and the plants are going to get harmed. Okay. So while large mammalian herbivores such as the cattle, sheep, and water buffalo may be most familiar, and most herbivores are the invertebrates. So large mammalian herbivores and the invertebrates, these are actually the most important herbivores. So mammalian herbivores are including the cattle and sheep, and the invertebrates as herbivores include the grasshoppers, caterpillars, and the beetles. So in the ocean, the herbivores include the sea urchins and the tropical fishes and certain mammals. And many herbivore insects have chemical sensors on their feet that enable them to distinguish between the plants based on their toxicity or the nutritional value. So herbivorous insects having the chemical sensors on their feet will have a detection of the plants that what kind of plants are beneficial for these insects or not. Okay. So here's an example of the herbivorous marine mammal. So some mammalian herbivores, such as the goats, use their sense of smell to examine the plants, rejecting some and eating others. So definitely some insects and herbivores are having some kind of sensations so that they can detect the useful, the beneficial and the harmful or the disadvantageous grasses or plants so that they can consume them or not. Unlike the animals, plants cannot run away to avoid being eaten. So, how the plants are going to have their survival? So, the plants' arsenal against herbivores may feature chemical toxins or structures such as spines and thorns. So, definitely, plants will have some adaptations in the form of spines or thorns. So, these spines and thorns will prevent the other organisms from eating these plants. Among the plant compounds that serve as chemical defenses includes the poison, strychnine produced by the tropical vine, and nicotine from the tobacco plant, tannins from a variety of plant species. Okay, so this poison, this nicotine, and this tannins, all of these are the chemicals. These are the chemical adaptations that plants have attained so that they can be prevented from the plant eating species. Okay, so compounds that are not toxic to humans but may be distasteful to many herbivores are responsible for the familiar flavors of the cinnamon, cloves, and permanent. So certain plants produce the chemicals that cause abnormal development in some insects that eat them up. Now the parasitism. So parasitism is a positive negative exploitative interaction in which one organism, the parasite, derives its nourishment from the other organism, its host, okay, which is harmed. So the parasite, it's going to live in or on the body of the host, such as the tapeworm. Tapeworms are endoparasites. They are going to live within the body of the host. but some are going to live on the external surface of the host, like the ticks and the lice. So these are known as the ectoparasites. Okay. So in one particular type of the parasitism, parasitoid insects have a small wasps lay eggs on or in the living hosts, and the larvae then feed on the body of the host, eventually killing it. So parasites can significantly affect the survival, reproduction, and density of their hosts. Okay. So here's an example of fun parasite, the insect. Insect like the wasp. So wasp will lay eggs in the host, and from these eggs, the larvae will be emerged out, and these larvae will feed on the blood of the host, and eventually the host will be killed, and all of these parasites are going to affect the survival, reproduction, and density of their hosts. Okay. For example, the ticks. Ticks are going to feed as an ectoparasite on the moose, and they can weaken their hosts by withdrawing the blood and causing the hair breakage and loss. So the weakened condition, the moose have a greater chance of dying from the cold stress or the predation by the wolves. Okay. So this is known as the parasitism. Okay, so the next one is mutualism. Mutualism is an interspecific interaction that benefits both the species. So it's a positive interaction. So examples include the cellulose digestion by the microorganisms in the digestive system of the termites and the ruminant mammals. Okay, so the microorganisms are living in the digestive system of the termites because termites are going to eat the wood, but termites are not able to digest this wood. So definitely these microorganisms living in the digestive system of these termites will release an enzyme, cellulase enzyme, for the digestion of the cellulose that is a component of the wood. Next are the animals that pollinate the flowers or disperse the seeds. Okay, so in this case the animals like the insects, they're going to pollinate the flowers, and the animals or the insects need the nectar from the flowers, so they're going to suck the nectar from the flowers, and insects are going to benefit from this relationship as well as the flowers, because flowers are going to pollinate as a result of these animals. Okay. Nutrient exchange between the fungi and the plant roots in mycorrhiza. So mycorrhiza is an association of the plant roots and the fungi. Fungi is going to supply the nutrients from the far away places in the soil to the plant roots, and the plant roots are going to supply the fungi with the specific nutrients. Photosynthesis by the unicellular algae in the corals. Okay, so in some mutualism, such as the acacia ant example, as you can see here in the diagram, each species depends on the other for their survival and the reproduction. In other mutualism, however, both species can survive on their own, and both partners are going to have the incur costs as well as the benefits. Okay. So in mycorrhiza, the plant often transfers the carbohydrates to the fungus, and the fungus transfers the limiting nutrients from far away places, specifically the phosphorus, to the plants. Now the commensalism. Okay, so an interaction between the species that benefits one of the species but neither harms nor helps the other species means it's a positive zero interaction. Okay. And in another example of the commensalism, the cattle egrets feed on the insects flushed out of the grass by the grazing bison. Okay. Cattle, horses, and other herbivores. So, because the birds increase their feeding rates when following the herbivores, they clearly benefit from the association. When these cattle, horses, or bison, or all of these organisms are going to feed on the herbivores, so they will cause the release of some kind of flush, okay, from these grasses. So the birds are going to have their nutrition in the form of flush from these grasses. So much of the time, the herbivores are not affected by the birds. At the time, however, the herbivores too may derive from the benefit. For example, the birds may remove and eat the ticks and the other ectoparasites from their skin, or they may have warned the herbivores of a predator's approach. So in this case, you can see here that a cattle or horses, or you can see a bison here, So when they're going to eat up the grasses, the birds are going to eat up the ticks or mites from their hairs, and in this way, the bison is going to have the benefit, and the birds are not having any kind of benefit, or you can say harm. Now the trophic structure. Okay, so the feeding relationships between the organisms is the trophic structure of the community. Now the food chain. So the food chain, the transfer of the food energy upward from its source in plants and other autotrophs like the primary producers to the herbivores, the primary consumers, to the carnivores, the secondary consumers, and tertiary and quaternary consumers, and eventually to the decomposers is referred to as the food chain. Means the transfer of the food energy upward from primary producers like the phytoplanktons or the plants to the primary consumers like the zooplanktons or herbivores, and on these primary consumers, the secondary consumers are going to feed upon like the fish on the zooplankton and this mouse on the herbivore. Okay, and the tertiary consumers are going to eat up these secondary consumers, like the this fish is eaten up by the larger fish, and this mouse is eaten up by the carnivore, the snake, and then they're going to be eaten up by the quaternary consumers like this fish by the carnivore larger fish dolphin, and this snake by the hawk. Okay, so this one is a food chain in which the food is going to be transferred from the producer to the, or energy is going to be fixed from the producer to the quaternary consumers and ultimately to the decomposers. So the position of an organism occupies in a food chain is called its trophic level. So each of this one is a trophic level. Okay, now the food webs. So a food chain is not an isolated unit separated from other feeding relationships in a community. So instead, a group of the food chains are linked together to form a food web. Okay. And you can see here, these are a lot of the food chains that are connected to each other. So this one is known as the food web. Now, the species with the large impact. So, the first one are the dominant species. So, these are in a community that are most abundant or that collectively have the highest biomass. Okay, the dominant species are those that are contributing much in our community with the highest biomass or with the most abundant species. Okay, so one hypothesis about the dominant species is that they are competitively superior in exploiting the limited resources such as space, water, or nutrients. Okay. And another hypothesis about the dominant species is that they are more successful at avoiding the herbivory or the impact of the disease. Okay. So these are the two things or two hypotheses about the dominant species. And the later idea about that they are more successful at avoiding the herbivory explains that the high biomass attained in some environments by the invasive species, and such species may not face the herbivores or parasites that would otherwise hold their populations in check. Now, the second one are the keystone species. So, in contrast to dominant one, these are not usually abundant in the community. They have the disproportionality large effect on the communities in which they occur. So, they have to maintain, these are the effects of these keystone species. They are going to maintain the local diversity within a community, either by controlling the populations of the species that would otherwise dominate the community, or by providing the critical resources for a wide range of species. For example, the starfish is a keystone species in the rocky marine intertidal communities of the northwest coast of North America. This predatory starfish feeds on the mussel and is responsible for maintaining the local diversity of species within that community. And when starfish have been removed experimentally, the mussel population expanded rapidly and covered the rocky intertidal shores so exclusively that other species cannot establish themselves. So it's a simple thing that these keystone species are not actually abundant in a community, but their removal from the environment will surely have effect on the abundance of the other species in that area or in that habitat. Now, the ecosystem engineers, so some species that dramatically alter the environment, these are known as the ecosystem engineers, means that they are going to change or alter the environment. Okay, so these are also known as the foundation species. A familiar ecosystem engineer is a beaver. Now, what is guild? So most communities contain the groups of the species known as guilds, which exploit the same kinds of the resources in comparable ways. Okay, so guilds may consist of different insect species that collect nectar in similar ways, various bird species that employ the insect foraging techniques, diverse plant species that have evolved comparable floral shapes with which they attract the same group of pollinators or the other insects. Okay. Guilds are composed of groups of the closely related species that arose from a common ancestry, and they exploit the resources in similar ways as a result of the shared ancestry. So these are all. This one is all about the guilds. That these are the species that are actually the groups of the species that are going to exploit the same kind of resources in the environment. Okay. Now, the patrons of the community structure. So, the ecological succession. The structure of the community is going to change constantly. Okay. Or you can say the succession is a series of changes in the community structure of an ecosystem with the passage of time. Okay. It's a process of establishing a community in an area. And the structure of the community evolves over time. So all the communities are subjected to periodic disturbances ranging from events that have only localized effects, such as the loss of a tree that creates a gap in the canopy of a forest, okay, to those that have catastrophic consequences, which include the wildfires, means creating the situations that will lead to the loss of the trees from a community, or any kind of disaster situations like the wildfires. So all of these are the happenings that might take place in a specific community that will lead to the loss of species from that community. Okay. So each new disturbance within a landscape creates an opportunity for a new species to colonize that region. So as a result of any catastrophic event like the wildfire, or as a result of loss of trees from a specific area, there will be a chance for the new species to come and inhabit such kind of area. Okay. So new species also alter the characters of the community, creating the environment that is suitable to even newer species. So definitely the species that are going to inhabit in this area, the new species, they will definitely adapt according to the environment, or they will lead to some changes in that environment so that they can adapt in this. Now the types of succession, the primary and the secondary. So primary is the one which starts from the lifeless area. Okay, like from the area in which the lava flows, newly formed sand dunes or rocks left from a retreating glacier. Okay, so when the lava flows, a newly formed sand dune will be here, or when the retreating glaciers are going to be formed, then as a result of the retreating glaciers, a new rock will be formed. From a new rock, from a new sand, that is actually a lifeless area, succession might start. Okay. Secondary succession actually starts from an area from where the existing population or the existing community has been disturbed or has been exploited or removed as a result of any fire, or you can say as a result of any natural calamity. So a community that previously existed has been removed, and it is typified by the smaller scale disturbances that do not eliminate all life and nutrients from the environment. So events such as the fire that sweep across a grassland or a storm that uproots the trees within a forest create the patches of habitat that are colonized by the early successional species. For example, many plant species in the fire-prone environments have seeds that remain dormant within the soil until the heat of the fire stimulates them to germinate. Okay, so if a community is present in an area and the fire is leading to the vanishing of this community from that area, then few seeds might left in such soil of the previous community. So these seeds will lead to the germination for the establishment of the new community. So this one is the secondary one. Now, the process of succession, initially, a small number of species from the surrounding habitats, they're going to thrive in the disturbed habitat, and they will have some kind of specific adaptation so that they can start a new habitat, or they can become the pioneers, okay, the starters of the community. So, a new plant species like uh, the complex ones, they're going to take hold of these smaller number of species, okay. They modify the habitat by altering such things as the amount of the shade on the ground or the mineral composition. So when a new species will take place, the location of the previous or the smaller number of species, so the smaller number of species will be reduced, or they are going to be killed as a result of the shade of the larger species. So when they're going to be killed, their minerals are going to be deposited in the soil. The soil will become more fertile for the coming species. These changes allow the other species that are better suited to this modified habitat to succeed the old species, and the newer species are superseded in turn by still newer species. Okay, means so for the older species is going to be killed, the new species will take its place, and the nutrients of the older species, they are going to become part of the soil, and the soil will become more fertile with the passage of time, and the more and more complex plants or the organisms will take its place. Now the ecotones. Okay, so ecosystems are almost always a patchwork of the communities that exist at the different successional stages. The sizes, frequencies, and intensities of the disturbances differ among the ecosystems, creating the differences in what is called the patch dynamics of the communities. So along the edges of each patches are areas called the ecotones. Okay. These junction zones often contain the species of each of the overlapping communities, as well as some species that have become adapted specifically for living in these zones. The ecotones are actually the margins of the, or you can say the overlapping areas of the different communities or the different species. In many cases, the number of the species and the population density are greater within the ecotone than in the surrounding communities. Okay, and a phenomena known as the edge effect. So he's talking about the greater population density in the ecotone region, that is actually a overlapping region of the communities. So definitely, this greater population or density of the organisms in ecotone is known as the edge effect. So in North America, the parasitism of the bird nests by the brown-headed cowbirds is frequent in ecotones between mature forests and the earlier successional patches. So cowbirds lay their eggs in the nests of the other birds and are active mainly in the patches, and forest birds whose nests are deep within the interior of the mature forests are less likely to be attacked than those within the ecotones. Means the birds that are having their nests on the ecotones, they are having the greater chances of attack by their predators. But the forest birds that are living within the deep or within the interiors of these mature forests, but not on the ecotones, so they will surely have less chances of attack from other predator. Now the ecological niche. Ecological niche encompasses the habitat of a species, and it refers to the way a species relates to or fits in with its environment. So, as a species, adapt to the physical parameters and biota within the community. The natural selection favors the development of the specialized features that allow the species to exploit the surrounding resources. So, niche is actually in a habitat of a species in which it's living, or a role performed by a species in a specific area. How the species relates to its environment, how it fits in the environment, what it eats, and where it lives. All of these things are involved in the ecological niche. These are actually the parameters of the niche. Now we have some important questions. So the first one is, the abandoned farmland usually reverts back to the forest. So this process of forest regeneration is called the primary succession, secondary, or the bioremediation or deforestation. So this one is the secondary succession, because he has told about the abandoned farmland, a land where previously a community was established, but now it has been erased from that area. So a new community will take place of it as a result of the secondary succession. Now, number 2 is a species that has an essential role in maintaining an ecosystem structure is called the keystone species. Okay, because we know that the keystone species are not actually having the highest diversity or highest biomass, but they are involved in maintaining the ecosystem. If these keystone species are going to be removed from one area, the other species are going to be, you can say, have abundance in that area. Okay. Number 3, approximately what percentage of energy will be passed on to the next trophic level in a trophical food chain? It's about 10%. Okay, so at the rate of 10%, this is also called the 10% law. So at a rate of 10% law, the energy is going to be transferred from one to the next trophic level. Number 4, in a food chain, the trophic level that has the greatest biomass is the producer. Okay, because producers are going to fix the energy from the directly from the sun. And after that, when it's going to be moved from producer to the primary, secondary, tertiary consumers, and so on, so the amount of the energy is going to be decreased. Okay, number 5, the first trophic level refers to the producers. Okay. Number 6, different species can share the same habitat, but competition among them is reduced if they occupy the different niches. So surely if they are living in the same habitat, and competition will have the less impact on these species if they are occupying the different niches. Okay. Number 7, a species may become invasive if dash are absent from the environment. So if limiting factor is absent from the environment, so the species will become invasive. Okay, it will live in that area in the abundant amount or in the greater density. Number 8, exposed rock, lichens and mosses, small herbs and shrubs, black spruce, white spruce, which is the pioneer in the climax community. So the pioneers are the exposed rock and the white spruce. Okay. Number 9, predation or parasitism is represented by positive negative interaction, because in this case, one is going to have the benefit and the other is going to have the disadvantage. Number 10, commensalism is represented by positive and zero, in which one is going to have the benefit and the other is neither having any harm or neither having any advantage. Okay. So we have done with the community ecology. Hopefully you like this video, and inshallah we'll come up with the next video. Until then, Allah Hafiz.